We got Nutella cookies with Nutella on them, and they were delicious.
It's true. I let them have cookies with Nutella spread on them. Because they did a great job today. And I rewarded them with sugar. Whether it was Peemer's company or the absence of the girls, or both, Manoli didn't know, but suddenly she was included in the table conversations. The boys opposite her had question after question about her fire lizards, how she had accidentally discovered the queen's clutch in the sand, how she had saved the hatchlings from destruction by thread, how she had found enough food to support their voracious appetites, how she dragged a wherry from the mire to provide oil for her fire lizard's patchy skins. She sensed that the boys gradually became reconciled to her possession of so many fire lizards because it was obviously no gather day to take care of them. They had the most bizarre theories about fire lizards and a few unsubtle queries about when would her queen fly to mate, and how soon would there be a clutch, and how many in it. The masters and journeymen would get first crack anyhow, Peemer said, disgruntled. It ought to be free choice the way dragons choose their riders, said Brawley. Fire lizards aren't quite the same as dragons, Brawley, said Peemer, glancing at Manoli for support. Look at Lord Grokey. What dragon would have picked him if it had had another choice? The boys shushed him, glancing nervously about to see if anyone had overheard his indiscreet remark. The Weirs have control of the fire lizards any route, said Brawley. You can just bet the Weirs are going to hand them out while they'll keep the Lord Crafters and Craftmasters happy. Manoli sighed for the truth of that surmise. Yes, but you can't make a fire lizard stay with you if you're mean to him, said Peemer flatly. I heard that Lord Miran's disappears for days. Where do they go? Asked Brawley. As Manoli didn't know, she was just as glad that the eerie sound, which Domik had said was the threat alarm, sounded, effectively ending the conversation. That means threat is directly over us, said Peemer, hunching his shoulders and pointing toward the ceiling. Look at that! And Brawley's startled exclamation made everyone turn about. On the mantel behind her were ranged all 9 fire lizards, their eyes sparkling with rainbow reflections of intense agitation, their wings spread, talons unsheathed. They were hissing, retracting and extending their tongues as if licking imaginary thread from the air. Manoli half rose, glancing towards the round table. She saw Domik nodding permission to her as he too got to his feet. He was gesturing to someone at the journeymen's tables. The alarm chorus would be appropriate, Brutigan, he called as he crossed to the hearth, a wary eye on the fire lizards. Manoli motioned to Beauty. The little queen ignored her, rising to her haunches and starting to keen a piercing series of notes, up and down and almost inaudibly high octave. The others joined her. For the sake of our ears, Manoli, can you get your creatures to sing with the chorus now? Brutigan, where's your beat? Feet began to stamp. 1, 2, 3, 4, and suddenly the fire lizard's keen was covered by the mass chorus. Beauty fanned her wings in surprise, and Mimic backwinged himself off the mantel, only missing a drop to the floor by claws biting into the wood. Drummer beat and piper blow, harper strike and soldier go, sang the massed voices. Manoli joined in, singing directly to the fire lizards. She was aware of Brutigan, then Sibel and Talmor coming to stand beside her, but facing the boys. Brutigan directed, cueing in the parts, the descant on the refrain. Above the male voices, pure and piercingly thrilling, rang the fire lizard.
Move my milk cup so that there isn't another catastrophe.
That's a good idea. Rang the fire lizard's tone, weaving their own harmonies about the melody. The last triumphant note echoed through the corridors of the Harper Hall, and from the doorway to the outer hall there came a sigh of pleasure. Manoli saw the kitchen drudges, an utterly entranced camo among them, standing there, every face wreathed with smiles. I'd say, please stop, you'll break it, and then we won't have a remote again.
Okay.
I'd say that a rendition of Moretta's Ride might be in order, if you think your friends would oblige us, Brutigan said, with a slight bow to Manoli and a gesture to take his place. Beauty, as if she understood what had been said, gave a complacent chirp, blinking the first lids across her eyes so that those nearest laughed. That startled her, and she fanned her wings as if scolding them for impudence. That prompted more laughter, but Beauty was now watching Manoli. Give the beat, Manoli, said Brutigan, and because his manner indicated that he expected her obedience, she raised her hands and sketched the time. The chorus responded at the upstroke, and she experienced a curious sense of power as she realized that these voices were hers to direct. Beauty led the fire lizards in another dizzying climb of sound, but they sang the melody, octaves above the baritones who introduced the first stanza of the ballad, to the muted humming of the other parts. The baritones, Manoli felt, were not really watching her, so she signaled for more intensity because, after all, the ballad told of a tragedy. The singers gave more depth to their part. Manoli had often led the evening sings at the half-circle sea-hold, so conducting was not new to her. It was the quality of the singers, their responsiveness to her signals, that made as much difference as chalk from cheese. Once the baritones had finished telling of the dread sickness in the land, which had struck with incredible speed across the breadth of Pern, the full chorus quietly reintroduced the refrain of Moretta secluded with her queen, Orlith, who is about to clutch in Fort Weir, while the healers from all holds and weirs try to isolate the form of the disease and find a cure. The tenors take up the narration with increasing intensity, the basses and baritones emphasizing the plight of the land, herd beasts left untended, wherries breaking into crops as holders, crafters, dragonfolk alike are consumed by the dread fever. A bass sings the solo of Capiam, master healer of Pern, who isolates the illness and suggests its cure. Those dragon riders who are still able to stay on their beasts fly to the rainforest of Nabolan Ista to find and deliver to Capiam the all-important seeds that contain the cure, some riders dying with the effort as they complete their task. A dialogue between baritone, Capiam, and the soprano, Moretta, was sung, Manoli only vaguely cognizant, by Pemer. Excitement builds as Moretta, once Orlith has clutched, is the only healthy dragon rider at the fort, and one of the few immune to the disease. It is up to her to deliver the medicine. Moretta, pushing herself and her queen to the limits of their endurance, flies between, from hold to hold, craft hall to hut, caught from weir to weir. The final verse, a dirge with keening descant, this time so appropriately rendered by the fire lizards that Manoli waved the human silent, ended in the sorrowful farewell of a world to its heroines, as Orlith, the dying Moretta on her back, seeks the oblivion of between. Such a deep silence followed the soft final chord that Manoli shook off the spell of the song with difficulty. I wonder if we could ever repeat that again, Brudigan said slowly, thoughtfully, after a further moment of almost unendurable silence. A sigh of release from the thrall of the music spread through the hall. It's the fire lizards, said the very soft voice of the usually impudent Pemer. You're right, Pemer, Brudigan replied, considering the suggestion, and there was a murmur of assent from the others. Manoli had taken a seat, her knees shaking and her insides gripped by a rhythmic shuddering. She took a sip of the claw remaining in her cup. Cold or not, it helped. Manoli, do you think they'd sing like that again? Brudigan asked, dropping to the bench beside her. Manoli blinked at him, as much because she hadn't had time to recover from the extraordinary experience of directing a trained group as because he, a journeyman, was asking the advice of the newest arrival in the Harpercraft Hall. They sang fine with me yesterday, sir, said Pemer. Then he giggled. Manoli told Master Schoneger that it's hard to keep him quiet when you don't want him singing. Right, Manoli? Pemer chortled again. All his impudence revived. That's what happened the other morning, sir, when you didn't know who was singing. To Manoli's relief, Brudigan laughed heartily, evidently reconciled. Manoli managed a shy and apologetic smile for that untoward incident, but the chorus leader was watching the fire lizards now. They were preening their wingtips or glancing about the room at all the people, oblivious to the sensation they had just caused. Pretty, sing pretty, said Camo, appearing beside Manoli and Brudigan, a pitcher of steaming claw in one hand. He poured some into each empty cup, and then Manoli noticed that the drink was being served throughout the hall. You like their singing, eh, Camo? Asked Brudigan, taking a judicious sip from his mug. Sing higher than Peemer here, and he's got the best voice we've had in many a turn. As if he didn't know it, Brudigan reached across the table to ruffle Peemer's hair. Pretty sing again? Asked Camo plaintively. They can sing any time they like for all of me, Brudigan replied, nodding to Manoli. But right now, I want to get some practice done. We've that big choral work to polish properly before Lord Grohy's entertainment. With a sigh, he pushed himself to his feet and tapped an empty claw pot for silence. Don't stop them if they feel like singing, Manoli, he added, inclining his head toward the fire lizards. Now then, you lot. We'll begin with the tenor solo. Fasnell, if you please. And Brudigan pointed to one of the journeymen who rose to his feet. Listening to the rehearsal was not quite the same involving experience as directing. Then Manoli had felt herself to be an extension of the choral group. Now she found it objectively interesting to observe Brudigan's direction, and to think what she would do with the same passages. About the time she decided that he was an exceedingly clever director, she realized that she'd been setting herself in comparison with a man in every way superior in experience and training. Manoli almost laughed aloud. Yet, she reflected, this was what life should be in a Harper Hall. Music, morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. She couldn't have enough of it, and yet she could now see the logic of afternoons spent on other chores. Her fingertips ached from the harp strings, and her scarf felt hot and pulsed. She massaged her hand, but that was too painful. She'd left the jar of numbweed in the cot, which meant she'd have to wait until after Threadfall to get easement. She wondered if the girls knew what went on in the Harper Hall during Threadfall. Hadn't Peemer said they were up at the Hold during fall? She shrugged. She was far happier to be here. Once more the eerie alarm cut through other sounds. Brudigan abruptly ended the practice, thanking his chorus members for their attention and hard work. Then he stood back politely as a tall, older journeyman walked quietly to the fireplace, raising his hands unnecessarily for attention. Everyone remembers his duties now? There was a murmur of assent. Would someone let Callie outside?
I don't know how.
Okay, hold on. Good. As soon as the doors are open, join your sections. With luck and Fort Weir's usual efficiency, we'll be back in the hall by supper time. I've meat rolls for the outside crews, announced Sylvina, standing up at the round table. Camo, take the tray and stand by the door. A second weird hooting, and then the clang and ring of metal and a ponderous creaking. Manoli half wished she were in a position to see the hall doors working as light began to flood the outer hallway. A cheer went up, and the boys surged toward the entrance, some going across the tide to take meat rolls from Camo's patiently held tray. Then the dining hall shutters clanked back, the afternoon sunlight an assault on eyes accustomed to the softer illumination from glow baskets. "Here they come! Here they come!" rose the shout, and the flow toward the door became a scramble, despite the attempts of masters and journeymen to keep an orderly pace. "We can see as well from the windows, Manoli. Come on!" Peemer tugged at her sleeve. The fire lizards reacted to the excitement, streaking through the open window. Oh, honey, that's bad for your teeth. Shrieking through the open windows. Manoli saw the spiral of dragons descending in wings to the ground beyond the hall courtyard. Truly, they made a magnificent sight. The sky seemed to be as clogged with dragons as just recently it must have been with thread. The boys let out a cheer, and Manoli saw the dragon riders lifting their arms in response to the hooray. She might have lost her fear of thread, of being caught out holdless, but she would never lose that lift of heart at the sight of the great dragons who protected all Pern from the ravages of thread. "Manoli!" She whirled at the sound of her name and saw Sylvina standing there, a slight frown creasing her wide forehead. For the first time since morning, Manoli wondered what she had done wrong now. "Manoli, has nothing been forwarded to you from Bend and Weir in the way of clothes? I know that Master Robinson dragged you out of there with scant time to assemble yourself." Manoli could say nothing, realizing that Dunga had complained about her tattered trousers to Sylvina. The head woman was giving her clothes a keen scrutiny. "Well, for once," and Sylvina's admission was grudging, "Dunga is right. Your clothes are worn to the woof. Can't have that. You'll give the Harpercraft a bad name wandering about in rags, however attached to them you may be." "Sylvina, Great shells, child. I'm not angry with you." And Sylvina took Manoli's chin firmly in her hand and made her look eye to eye. I'm furious with myself for not thinking. Not to mention giving that Dunka a chance to snipe at you. Only don't go repeating that, please, for Dunka's useful to me in her own way. Not that you talk much anyhow. Haven't heard you put 2 sentences together yet. There now. What have I said to distress you? You just come along with me. And Sylvina took Manoli firmly by the elbow and marched her toward the complex of storage rooms at the back of the Harper Hall on the kitchen level. There's been so much excitement these days I haven't any more wit about me than camo. But then every apprentice is supposed to come with 2 decent sets of clothing, new or nearly new, so it never occurred to me. And you haven't come from Bend & Weir, I thought, though you weren't there long enough now, were you? Felina gave me the skirt and tunic, and they took my measure for boots. And Master Robinson threw you a dragon back before you could say a word. Well, now, let's just see. And Sylvina unlocked a door, flipped open a glow basket to illuminate a storeroom stacked from floor to ceiling with bolts of cloth, clothing, boots, hides made or uncut, sleeping furs, and rolls of tapestries and rugs. She gave Manoli another appraising look, turning her from side to side. We've more that's suitable for boys and men from the weaver and tanner halls. I'd really prefer trousers. Sylvina chuckled kindly. You're lanky enough to wear them well, I must say. And since you're to be using instruments, trousers will be handier than skirts. But you ought to have some finery, child. It does lift the spirits. And there's gathers. She was sorting through folded skirts of black and brown, which she replaced disdainfully. Now this! And she pulled out a bolt of rich, dark red fabric. That's too fine for me. You'd have me dress you in plain colors? Even the drudges have something good. Sylvina was scornful. You may not be proud in yourself, Manoli. In point of fact, your modesty has done you great service, but you will kindly consider the changes in your circumstance. You're not the youngest child in a family of an isolated sea-hold. You're an apprentice harper, and we, Sylvina tapped her chest smartly with her fingers, have appearances to maintain. You will dress yourself as well as, and if I've my way, better than, those fumble-fingered females, or those musical midgets who will never be more than senior apprentices or very junior journeymen. Now, a rich red will become you. Ah, yes, this will suit you well, she said, holding the red up against Manoli's shoulder. Until I can have that made up, trowels will have to do. And she held up a pair of dark blue hide pants to Manoli's waist. You're all leg. And here, she shoved a pair of close-woven blue-green trousers at Manoli. This should match the leather pants. And it does, she said, tossing to Manoli a dark blue jerkin. Put that lot on the chest there and try on this wear hide jacket. Yes, it's not too bad a fit, is it? Here's a hat and gloves. And tunics. Now these. And from another chest, Sylvina extracted breastbands and underpants, snorting as she passed them to Manoli. Dunka was quite incensed that you'd no underthings at all. Sylvina's amusement ended as she saw Manoli's face. Why ever are you looking so stricken? Because you wore your underthings out? Or because Dunka's pried into your affairs? You can't honestly be worried what that old fool thinks or says or does. Yes, you can, and you are, and you would. Sylvina pushed Manoli backwards until she sat abruptly on the chest behind her, while Sylvina, hands on her hips, regarded her with a curiously intense expression. I think, said Sylvina slowly, in a very gentle voice, that you have lived too much alone, and not just in that cave. And I think you must have been terribly bereft when old Peterian died. He seems to have been the only one in your hold who understood what's in you. Though why he left it so long to tell Master Robinson, I simply don't understand. Well, in a way I do, but that's neither here nor there. One thing's certain. You're not staying on in that cot. Not another night. Oh, but Sylvina. Don't oh, but Sylvina me, the woman said sharply, but her expression was mocking, not stern. Don't think I've missed Pona's little tricks, or Dunka's. No, the cot is the wrong place for you. I thought so when you first arrived, but there were other reasons for plunking you there at first. So, We'll take the long view, as should be done, and shift you here. Old Dive doesn't want you on your feet so much, and sure as fall will come again, the fire lizards are as unhappy at Dunca's as she is to have them. The old fool. No, Manoli. And now Sylvina was angry with Manoli. It is not your fault. Besides which, as a full Harper apprentice, you really haven't anything to do with the paying students. Further, you ought to be near those fire lizard eggs until they hatch. So, you're staying here in the hall. And that's the end of the matter. Sylvina got to her feet. Let's just gather these clothes and we'll settle you right now. Back in the room you had the first night. It's handy to the Harpers, and that's much too grand a place for me. Sylvina gave her a droll look. I could, of course, move all the furniture out, take down the hangings, and give you an apprentice's cot and a fold stool. I'd feel better about it. Sylvina stared at her so that Manoli broke off, flustered. Why, you numwit! You think I meant that? Didn't you? Because the things in that room are far too valuable for an apprentice. Sylvina was still staring at her. Oh. Having 9 fire lizards is causing enough trouble. The room would be just grand, and if I've only the furnishings of any other apprentice, why, that's proper, isn't it? Sylvina gave one more long, appraising look, shaking her head and laughing to herself. You're right, you know. Then none of the others could quibble about the change. But an apprentice's cot is narrow, and you've the fire lizards to consider. 2 apprentice cots, if you have them to spare? Done. We'll tie the legs together and heap the rushes high. Which is what they did. Without the rich hangings and heavy furniture, the chamber was echoingly empty. Manoli insisted that she didn't mind, but Sylvina said it wasn't up to her, because who was head woman in this hall? Hangings that Sylvina had removed for shabbiness were recovered from storage, and Manoli was told that she could mend them when she had free time. Several small rugs were spread on the floor. A long table from the apprentice's study, with a leg mended after being damaged in a brawl, a bench, and a small press for storage gave the room some hominess. Sylvina said that the place looked heartlessly plain, but certainly no one could fault it for not displaying an apprentice's lowly state. Now then, that's settled. Yes, Pemer, you were looking for me? No, Sylvina. It's Manoli I'm after, for Master Shonagar. She's dead late for her lesson. Nonsense! There are no regular lessons on a threadfall day. He should know that as well as anyone, Sylvina said, taking Manoli by the arm as she started to leave the room. That's what I told him, Sylvina, said Pemer, grinning from ear to ear, but he asked me when had Manoli been assigned to a section. And of course I know she hasn't, so he said that she'd have nothing better to do with her time, so she'd better learn something constructive. So, and Pemer shrugged his helplessness in the face of such logic. Well, girl, you better go then. We're all settled here anyway. And you, Pemer, you pop over to Dunca's. Ask Godiva, politely too, you imp, to bundle up Manoli's things, including the skirt and tunic Manoli washed today. What else did you have there, Manoli? Sylvina smiled as if she knew perfectly well that Manoli was grateful not to have to return to the cot. Master Durant has my pipe, so there's only the medicines. Off with you, Pemer, and mind you make sure it's Godiva. I'd have asked for her anyhow, Sylvina. Bold as brass you are, Sylvina called after him as he scampered down the steps. A good lad at heart. You've heard him sing? He's younger than I like to have them in the hall, but he does hold his own, rascal that he is. And where else should he be with that glorious treble voice? Planting tubers or herding the beasties? No. For such originals as Pemer and yourself, you're better here. Off with you now, before Master Shonagar starts bellowing. We don't really need a klaxon with him in the hall, so we don't. Sylvina had walked Manoli down the steps and now gave her a gentle shove toward the open hall doors as she turned toward the kitchen. Manoli watched her for a moment, suffused by an inarticulate gratitude and affection for Sylvina's understanding. The woman wasn't at all like Petirian, and yet Manoli knew that she could go to Sylvina, as she had to Petirian, when she was perplexed or in difficulties. Sylvina was like an anchor in the storm. Manoli, trotting obediently across the yard to Master Shonagar, smiled at such a seemingly metaphor for a land-bound woman. Master Shonagar did roar and bellow and carry on, but buoyed by Sylvina's courtesies, Manoli took the berating in silence until he made her promise faithfully that whatever else happened to her during the morning hours, the afternoon was his. Otherwise, he'd never make a singer of her. So she was to report to him, please and thank you, through fall, fog, or fire. For how else was she to be a credit to his skill, or the craft hall that had been pleased to exhibit its secrets for her edification and education?
Can I have a piece of paper?
The end.